I want to be clear about something before I begin. I have worked at Velorath 9 for 11 years. 11 years of watching ships dock and depart. 11 years of mopping the same polished floors and answering the same dumb questions from tourists who don't know which terminal connects to what. I have seen arguments. I have seen fistfights. I have seen a Draxian merchant actually cry in the middle of the food promenade because someone took the last portion of spiced grain paste. I thought I had seen everything. I was wrong. What I watched happen in Terminal 7, in the middle of the busiest transit corridor in the sector, was something I am still not sure I have the right words for. I've tried explaining it to my spouse 3 times now. Each time I get to the same part, I just stop talking. Not because I don't want to tell the story, because I still feel it, right here in the chest. That sensation when something shifts in the air around you and every instinct you have says, pay attention because you will never see this again. So I wrote it down instead. This is exactly what happened. Part 1, the station. Velorath 9 is not a glamorous place. If you have ever had a layover at a transit hub that smells faintly of recycled air and fried food, and the collective exhaustion of 10,000 travelers from 17 different star systems, you know what I mean. The ceilings are high, they have to be, to accommodate species of various heights and atmospheric pressure needs. And the floors are this pale gray composite material that always looks slightly wet even when it's perfectly dry. There are columns every 30 meters or so, big structural ones that also double as information terminals if you press the right panel. And between them there are benches, food stalls, currency exchange kiosks, and those little automated luggage carts that never quite go where you tell them to. Terminal 7 specifically handles mid-range passenger traffic, not the luxury charters, those dock at 5 and 6, not the freight haulers, that's 9 and 10. 7 is for regular people, working people, families traveling between stations, students on exchange programs, trade representatives who don't have the budget for a private berth but still need to get from point A to point B without dying. On that particular day, cycle 447, third rotation, which is roughly mid-afternoon by the reckoning of most species that care about such things, Terminal 7 was packed. I mean packed. I had never seen it that crowded, and I've worked every major holiday rush this station has seen for over a decade. There was a convoy of colonist ships that had just offloaded about 3,000 passengers from the Outer Rim settlements, all of them needing connections, all of them tired, most of them carrying children or elderly relatives or both. The waiting benches were full. The food lines were long. The air processors were working overtime, and still the air had that thick, slightly warm quality that too many bodies in too small a space always creates. I was doing my rounds near the eastern columns. This is a quieter section, relatively speaking. It connects Terminal 7 to the maintenance corridors, and there's a row of individual seating pods along the wall. Not comfortable exactly, but private. People go there when they want to sit without being jostled. That's where I first saw the girl. Part 2, the girl. She was sitting in one of those seating pods with her legs folded up onto the bench, a posture that looked almost meditative, very still, and she was eating something out of a dark metal container. Not eating fast, not eating with any particular urgency. Just eating. The way you eat when you're genuinely hungry, but you have no intention of rushing. She was human. That's the first thing I noted, and the reason I noticed her at all, honestly. Humans are not rare at Velorath 9, but they are not particularly common either. They're still a relatively young species in the galactic community, and there's still that novelty factor. You see a human, and some part of your brain does a small double take. Not because they're alarming, but because they're slightly unexpected. Like seeing a creature you've only ever seen in documentation out in the world, walking around, doing ordinary things. She looked young by human standards, maybe 25, 26 of their years. That's hard for me to gauge with precision. Humans age in complicated ways, and their youth often disguises how capable they are, which I think is a feature rather than a bug of their biology, though I didn't fully understand that until later. She had dark hair pulled back loosely, and she was wearing what I recognized as standard-issue working clothes, the kind of durable, function-over-fashion garments that laborers and field workers favor across a dozen different cultures. Not military. Not civilian luxury. Working clothes. The kind with extra pockets and reinforced knees and fabric that looks like it can take some punishment. Her bag was on the floor beside her. Large, military-style framing, lots of external attachment points. The kind of bag you carry when you need to be able to pack up and move fast. Her eyes were interesting, they kept moving. Not anxiously, there was no anxiety in this girl that I could detect, just awareness. She would look up from her food container, scan the corridor, clock the people moving through it, register what was relevant, and return to eating. It was automatic, like breathing. I know what that is now. I didn't know what to call it then. I just thought, that one is paying attention. I went about my rounds. I swept the area near columns E14 and E15. I restocked the sanitation dispensers. I answered a question from a Velnari family about which walkway led to the long-haul departure gates. Normal work, normal afternoon. I kept glancing toward the seating pods. I don't know why, the girl was not doing anything interesting. She finished her food, sealed the container, tucked it into her bag, and then just sat there, watching the corridor, perfectly still. I kept glancing because something about stillness like that pulls the eye. Most people at transit stations are in motion. Even when sitting, they shift, they fidget, they check their devices, they look at the boards, they talk to the people next to them. She was doing none of those things. She was just there in a way that most people at a transit station are not. It was maybe 20 minutes later that the Korath showed up. Part 3, the Korrath. For those unfamiliar, and I would not blame you, because Korath are not a species you encounter frequently outside certain trade corridors. They are large. That's the first and most significant thing. They're bipedal like humans, but they average about 2.5 meters in height, with a broad, heavily built body type and a skeletal structure that gives their movements a certain ponderous deliberateness. Their skin is a dark reddish-brown, almost the color of dried clay, and has a slightly rough texture, almost scaled in some lights, though technically it's not scales but a densely folded dermis. Their faces are flat, with 2 sets of eyes arranged in a slight vertical offset, which gives them excellent depth perception, but an expression that most other species tend to read as aggressive even when the Korath in question is perfectly calm. Which can be a problem. When one of them is actually aggressive, the distinction becomes very clear very quickly. This one was wearing a trader's harness, the kind with the multiple attachment loops for data tablets and identification documents. He had 2 companions flanking him, smaller individuals that I thought at first were also Korath, but turned out to be a species I didn't immediately recognize, smoother skin, more slender, wearing what looked like security contractor patches on their sleeves. The 3 of them moved through the corridor with that particular kind of energy that I've learned to read over the years. Not looking for their gate, not looking for food, not checking schedules. Looking for something to do. That specific kind of aimless, slightly too alert movement, that means a person or persons are bored in a way that is looking for an outlet. They moved down the eastern wall, past E12, past E13, past E14, where I was making a very great effort to be invisible while still doing my job. They stopped at the seating pods. The Korath's 2 sets of eyes landed on the girl. Part 4, the beginning. I don't know what made her the target. Maybe it was the quiet, maybe it was that she was alone. Maybe it was simply that she was human, and some segment of the older galactic species still carries this assumption. I have seen it play out in small ways 1,000 times, that humans are soft. New to space, unacclimatized, easy to rattle. I've talked to enough humans over the years to know that assumption is usually based on the way humans look. Small by galactic standards, smooth-skinned, seemingly fragile, moving through environments that, statistically speaking, their species evolved to handle somewhat less optimally than many others. What that assumption misses, consistently and sometimes catastrophically, is where humans are from. But I'm getting ahead of myself. The Korath stopped in front of the seating pod she was in. Not right in front of it, there was a slight diagonal, a positioning that blocked the egress from that section without technically being a direct confrontation. An experienced bully's move, plausible deniability. Oh, I was just standing here. His companions spread slightly, one to the left, one to the right. Also casual, also convenient. The girl looked up. She looked at the Korath. She looked at the 2 companions. She looked at the spatial arrangement they had created. And then she looked back at the Korath. And she waited. The Korath spoke in trade common, the interspecies pidgin that most stations use as a baseline for communication when species-specific translators aren't available. "This section is reserved," he said. His trade common was good, clear. He'd obviously learned it properly. The girl said nothing for a moment. Then, "I don't see a reservation marker." Her trade common was also good, slightly accented the way humans speak it, with the wrong emphasis on certain syllables, but clear. "Reservation was filed this morning," the Korath said. "You'll need to move." The girl looked at the pod she was sitting in. She looked at the pods to either side, both empty. She looked at the Korath. "I'll need documentation for that," she said. "Station regulations require active display of reservation status on occupied pods. This pod's display shows available." This pause. I actually stopped moving when she said that. It was so measured, so precise. Not aggressive, not defensive, just accurate. And delivered in a tone that was almost perfectly flat. No fear in it. No apology. No attempt to smooth things over. Just, "Here is the fact. Here is the regulation. What do you have?" The Korath recalibrated visibly. He'd expected, based on 11 years of reading people at this station, I am confident in saying this, he had expected her to either comply or to get flustered. Neither happened. "Are you calling me a liar?" the Korath said. The way he said it, his voice dropped into that register that large species sometimes use, the one that vibrates in the chest cavity, that hits a frequency that most smaller-bodied beings are instinctively uncomfortable with. A threat made through sound rather than words. The girl's expression didn't change. "I'm observing that the pod's status display shows available," she said. "I'm not making any claims about what you were told. I'm reporting what I can see." Another pause, longer this time. One of the companions, the left one, moved a quarter step forward. Part 5, the audience. "I need to tell you about the crowd. Because this is something I think about now, when I replay what happened, the way crowds work, the way people notice things. Terminal 7 has a lot of ambient noise. Movement, announcements from the public address system, the general murmur of a few thousand people doing their business. But humans, and most other species with decent situational awareness, respond to something that I can only describe as a change in the quality of attention around them. The ambient noise stays the same. The movement stays the same, but some signal gets through that says something is happening over there. And people look. Within maybe 2 or 3 minutes of the Korath stopping in front of her pod, I could see it happening. The travelers on the nearby benches were angling their bodies. A Setheri couple who had been in animated discussion had gone quiet, their heads turning fractionally. A group of colonist transit passengers who had been navigating the corridor were slowing, finding reasons to examine information terminals that they had no particular interest in. Nobody was making a scene about watching. Nobody wanted to be directly involved, but they were watching. The girl was aware of this too, I'm sure of it. I saw the small scan she did, eyes sweeping the perimeter before returning to the Korath. She knew she had an audience. She didn't adjust her behavior for it in any way that I could detect. That's the part I keep coming back to. A lot of people, when they become aware they're being watched, do something with that information. They perform, or they get more careful, or they posture. She just kept doing exactly what she was doing. Sitting, eating the situation with the same attention she'd been eating her food earlier. Calm, present, patient. The Korath was not being patient. "This is your last opportunity to relocate voluntarily," he said. "The alternative will be less comfortable for you." And she said, and I want to get this exactly right because the phrasing was so deliberate, "I appreciate you framing that as a choice." Just that, nothing else. Back to looking at him with that steady, unhurried expression. The left companion said something in a language I didn't recognize, directed at the Korath. The Korath responded in the same language, short exchange. The companion moved another quarter step forward. Part 6, the escalation. What happened next took about 40 minutes. I want to be specific about that because it's important. 40 minutes of escalation, of the Korath and his 2 companions using every social pressure tool in the standard intimidation playbook, and the girl just not reacting to any of it in the way they needed her to react. They tried volume. The Korath raised his voice several times, invoking regulatory complaints, threatening to involve station security, which was interesting because if he'd actually wanted station security, he could have called for them and chosen not to. implying connections to trade authority supervisors, demanding identification, demanding travel documentation. Each time, her response was either a specific question about the regulatory basis for his request, or simple factual restatement of the situation, or, and this was the one that seemed to bother him most, nothing at all. Silence used correctly is devastating. She used it correctly every single time. They tried proximity. The left companion moved to stand about 1.5 meters in front of her, the right one positioned closer to the access point of the pod. The Korath himself stepped forward until he was at the edge of the pod's space, not quite in it, but right at the threshold. That's a physical pressure technique. Most beings, faced with something much larger than them entering their personal space, will back up, step out of the space that is being claimed. Yield ground instinctively. She didn't move. Not an inch. She was still in the same position she'd been in when I first noticed her. Legs folded, back straight, hands loose in her lap. She looked up at the Korath from about 90 centimeters away, her head tilted back perhaps 20 degrees to meet his second set of eyes, and she just waited. I want to try to describe what it was like to watch that, because it sounds simple when I say it like that. She didn't move, but the quality of her not moving was specific. It was not the not moving of someone who was frozen, not the not moving of fear. It was the not moving of someone who had made a deliberate decision about where they were and was waiting to see what happened next with genuine, focused interest. The Korath tried mockery. He made several comments in trade common about human capabilities, human size, human history. The kind of dismissive language that implies a species is so new to the galaxy that they haven't yet earned the right to occupy space with the rest of civilization. These were not clever insults. They were blunt and predictable and frankly a little boring. But the intent was clear. Make her feel small, make her feel young, make her feel like she doesn't belong here, and see if embarrassment accomplishes what volume and proximity didn't. She smiled. Not a big smile, not performative. It was the smile of someone who finds something genuinely a little funny. She said, "You know what planet I'm from." The Korath looked at her. "Earth," she said. "You know what that place is like." The Korath said nothing. "No," she said. "That's okay. Most people don't, actually. I find it rarely comes up until it matters." And then she went quiet again. That was the moment, I think, that things began to shift. I can't entirely explain why. Something in the delivery of those 3 sentences, not boastful, not menacing, almost conversational, landed differently than anything she'd said before. The Korath's companions exchanged a look. The Korath himself went very still for a beat. And then, as if he'd decided that stillness was a weakness, he overcorrected. He raised his voice to the full register. Not just the resonant chest vibration, the full, actual volume that a Korath can produce when they're genuinely trying to make noise. It's significant. Terminal 7 has noise dampening built into its columns, which reduces ambient sound by about 30%. With that reduction in place, the Korath's voice still rattled the nearest information kiosk. "You will leave this section now," he said. And the terminal went quiet. Not completely. The PA system kept running. The ambient hum of climate systems continued. But the people, the 3,000 tired colonists and trade passengers and station workers, they all stopped making whatever noise they had been making, and they looked. Every single person in that section of Terminal 7 looked. The girl sat in the sudden quiet and looked at the Korath. She looked at the 2 companions, she looked at the crowd, and then she looked back at the Korath. "Sit down," she said quietly. His voice had filled the terminal. Hers barely carried 5 meters. And yet, Part 7, the thing about DATHWRLDRS. Let me tell you something I learned working at a transit station for 11 years. There are species that evolved in comfortable places. Stable climates, manageable predators, predictable food sources, the kind of world where intelligence was the primary competitive advantage because brute physical survival wasn't a constant negotiation. And then there are species that evolved in the other kind of place. Worlds where the temperature swings are lethal, where the atmosphere is wrong in ways that would kill most other species within minutes, where the gravitational pressure is so intense it builds bones and muscles that seem absurd in the comfortable corridors of a space station, where the other creatures that share the planet with you are so dangerous that your species spent hundreds of thousands of years developing threat assessment capability as a core survival tool. We call them Deathworlders. It's not an official classification. It's station slang that started, I think, with cargo workers who had to handle manifest documentation from particularly hostile planetary environments. The thing about Deathworlders, and I have met a few over the years, is that they don't look like what they are. They look like normal people. They move through the station making their purchases and checking their schedules and eating in the food promenade and doing all the normal things. And because they look normal, and because they're generally perfectly functional in polite galactic society, you forget. You forget what they're from. You forget that everything they are was shaped by a world that is trying to kill everything on it, continuously every day with extraordinary creativity. Humans are Deathworlders. I knew this in the abstract. I had it filed somewhere in my general knowledge as a fact that I had encountered and noted and not particularly thought about since. What I had never done, in 11 years of working at Velorath 9, was watch a Deathworlder be pushed. I mean pushed specifically and deliberately over a sustained period of time by someone who did not understand what they were dealing with. I had never watched that. Because usually, and this is also something I understand better now, usually humans in the galactic community are doing active work to not be what they are. To be calm, measured, socially appropriate. To fit into a broader civilization that operates at a pace and register that is genuinely more comfortable for most other species. They contain it. That is the phrase that one human transit worker I spoke to afterward used. We contain it. The girl had been containing it for 40 minutes. Part 8, the moment. I saw it happen the way you sometimes see weather change. You're looking at a sky and it's one thing overcast, calm, the light a particular flat gray, and then it's something else. Not gradually, not with warning. Between one moment and the next, the sky is a different sky. She was sitting, perfectly still, completely calm. The Korath had just finished his second full-volume demand for her departure and was beginning what sounded like a third variation on the theme of regulatory threat and species-based dismissal. And her face changed. Not dramatically. Nothing dramatic happened to her face. It did not go red, did not contort, did not produce any of the expressions that usually signal imminent conflict across most species types. If anything, it got quieter, more still. Like the surface of water going flat before something moves underneath it. She stood up. In the seating pod, with the Korath's companion still standing about a meter in front of her, she stood up, and for the first time she was not sitting, and for the first time the geometry of the situation was slightly different. She was not as tall as the Korath. She was not as tall as his companions. She was noticeably smaller than all three of them. But there was something about the way she stood, not positioned for confrontation exactly, but not positioned for anything else either, just present in the space in a way that was different from how she'd been present while sitting. That made the left companion take a full step back. Involuntary, the companion didn't decide to step back. Their body made that decision before whatever part of their brain registers conscious choices could intervene. The girl looked at the Korath. She didn't raise her voice. She said, "You have been standing in front of me for 43 minutes. You have tried to make me feel afraid. You have tried to make me feel small. You have used volume. You have used proximity. You have used social pressure." She paused. None of it worked. The Korath said something. I couldn't catch it. She continued as if he hadn't spoken. "I want to tell you something. I am from Earth. Earth has a gravity of approximately 9.8 meters per second squared, which is noticeably higher than this station's simulated field, which means everything I do here is a little easier than what I'm built for. Earth's atmosphere has a pathogen and toxin load that would be medically significant to most of the species in this terminal. The dominant megafauna on my planet evolved to hunt in coordinated packs and routinely take down prey 10 to 20 times their body weight. I grew up in a mountain range where the winters can kill you in a few hours if you make a mistake." She tilted her head slightly. "I am telling you this," she said, "not as a threat. I am telling you this because you have been standing in front of me for 43 minutes trying to frighten me, and you deserve to understand why that has not been working. It is not because you aren't intimidating. It is because I am from a place where what you have been doing would not register on the scale that my nervous system uses to define threatening." Complete silence in that section of Terminal 7. Not the silence of people looking away, the silence of people not breathing. "Now," she said, "you can continue, or you can walk away, but I want you to make that decision with accurate information." Part 9, what happened next? The Koreth made a sound. I cannot transcribe it in trade common or any language I speak. It was a deep, percussive sound, the kind that means in Koreth social signaling something like this is not finished. And he moved forward. Not a full aggressive movement. More like a lean, the beginning of an advance. A physical commitment to not backing down. A doubling down on the approach that had failed for 43 minutes because the alternative was to lose face in front of an audience that had grown by that point to include probably 400 observers. I do not know exactly what she did. It was fast, genuinely fast in a way that I want to be careful about describing because I don't want to exaggerate. It was not superhuman. She moved like a person who has spent a significant portion of their life moving quickly in response to situations that required it. She was no longer in front of the pod. The Koreth's forward lean carried him past where she had been. She was standing 2 meters to his left, in the open corridor. And the left companion, who had been in that position, was now on the ground. Not unconscious. Not injured as far as I could tell. Simply down with the particular expression of someone who has had a physical interaction with another person go badly wrong from their perspective. The right companion had not moved, was not moving, was watching the girl with both of their eyes widened. The girl was standing in the corridor with her hands at her sides, completely still again. She looked at the Koreth. "That one reached for something on his harness," she said. "I addressed that. No one else needs to do anything." The Koreth looked at his companion on the ground. He looked at his other companion. He looked at the girl. He looked at the crowd of approximately 400 beings who were watching this, with the collective held breath of people watching something they will be telling others about for years. He stood up very straight. And then, without saying anything, he turned and walked away. His standing companion followed. The one on the ground got up, slowly, carefully, with obvious care for whatever parts of themselves had met the floor unexpectedly, and followed. The girl watched them go. She watched until they were out of sight. Then she turned, went back to the seating pod, sat down in exactly the position she'd been in before, and picked up a data pad from her bag. Just like that. Done. Part 10, Aftermath. The sound that came back into Terminal 7 after a moment of absolute silence was significant. Not loud exactly, people were too stunned for immediate loudness, but layered. That specific murmur that a large crowd makes when they are all processing the same thing and turning to the person next to them to confirm that they also saw what they saw. A Cytherea woman near the benches said something to her travel companion in their own language and then laughed. Not a mocking laugh, a surprised one. The kind that comes out of you when something happens that you were not prepared for. The left companion, the one who had been on the ground, limped slightly as they followed the Koreth. I noticed this and filed it away. I walked over to the girls' section. This was technically my professional responsibility. Ensure there was no ongoing disruption. Confirm no assistance was needed. Practical reasons. She looked up when I approached. I said in trade common, "Are you all right? Do you need anything?" She considered this question for a moment. "I could use a refill on water if there's a dispensary close." "Column E," I said, "about 15 meters." "Thank you," she said, and then after a beat, "Sorry about the noise." "The noise," I said, "was not yours." She smiled at that, a different smile from the one she'd given the Koreth, smaller, warmer, fair. I went and filled a dispenser cup from E14 and brought it back. She accepted it with a nod. "You from Earth?" I asked. "I don't usually engage with passengers like this." It felt warranted. "Born there," she said. "Haven't been back in 4 years." "What brings you through Velorath 9? She looked at the corridor for a moment. The ordinary flow of travelers had resumed, the spell of collective held breath had broken, and people were moving and talking and checking schedules again, the incident already sliding into the recent past file in a few thousand different memories. "Work," she said. "I consult for planetary assessment teams. The new settlement surveys out past the Varan boundary." I thought about that. Planetary assessment teams out past the Varan boundary meant going to places that hadn't been surveyed yet. places that might have any number of conditions that were unknown quantities. The kind of work where you needed someone who wouldn't freeze when something unexpected and potentially dangerous came up. I thought about what I'd just watched for 43 minutes, and then what I'd watched in about 3 seconds after that. I nodded. "That makes sense," I said. She looked at me with an expression that was a little tired, a little amused, and something else that I don't quite have a word for. Knowing, maybe. The expression of someone who is used to people understanding something about them, just slightly too late, just slightly after the fact. "Yeah," she said. "I get that a lot." Part 11, what I found out later. 3 hours after the incident, I was finishing my end-of-rotation paperwork in the staff room, and one of the security officers, a Velnari named Thress who has worked this station as long as I have, came in and poured herself a drink and said without preamble, "You saw the thing in Terminal 7 this afternoon." It wasn't a question. Everyone had seen it or heard about it within the hour. "I saw it," I confirmed. Thress sat down across from me. "Did you know what she was before it happened?" "I knew she was human," I said. "Did you know she was that kind of human?" I told Thress about the working clothes, the bag, the way she moved, the way she watched the corridor. Thress nodded slowly. "She's got a transit file." I pulled it after the report came in. The Korath filed a complaint incidentally. She paused. "It went nowhere, obviously. The companion who went down confirmed to security that he had initiated physical action first. Girls clear." "What's in the transit file?" Thress looked at her drink. "She's a level 7 planetary surveyor, certified for extreme environment assessment, pre-contact world assessment, 11 different hostile environment clearances." She paused. "You know what the certification requirements are for pre-contact world assessment?" I said I did not. "Among other things," Thress said, "you have to demonstrate that you can survive unassisted in a fully hostile planetary environment for a minimum of 72 hours. With whatever you can carry in a standard field pack." I thought about the bag, the external attachment points, the reinforced construction. "That bag she was carrying," I said. "Almost certainly," Thress said. We sat with that for a moment. "The Korath," I said. "Did he know any of that?" Thress shook her head. "The Korath is a minor trade coordinator out of the Fenley's corridor. His record is not clean. Few harassment reports from other stations. Nothing that ever escalated before." "He picked the wrong person." "He picked someone from Earth," Thress said, as if that were a complete answer. In a way, it was. Part 12, what it means. I have been thinking about this for a long time now, since I decided to write it down, trying to figure out what exactly it is that I want to say about what happened. Because on the surface, it's a simple story. A bully tried to push someone around. The someone didn't push back, not for a long time, not until she had to, and even then with a precision that was more clinical than angry. The bully backed down. End of story. These things happen. But I keep coming back to the 43 minutes. Because that's the part that I think matters. That's the part I haven't seen before and haven't seen since. 43 minutes of sustained social and physical pressure, and she just absorbed it. Not passively, not by going somewhere else in her head. She was present for all of it. Watching it, processing it, responding to it precisely where precision was needed, and otherwise simply waiting. I asked Thress about this later. I said, "Do you think she was ever scared?" Thress thought about this carefully. She's a thoughtful person. She said, "I think she made a decision at some point early in that 43 minutes about what the actual risk level was, and I think that decision was probably pretty accurate. And I think once she made it, she filed it and got on with managing the situation." "That sounds like someone who's made a lot of those decisions," I said. "That sounds like someone from Earth," Thress said again, and again it felt like a complete answer. "Humans contain it." That's the phrase I can't get out of my head. They come from a place that made them into something, forged them into something, over hundreds of thousands of years of pressure and survival, and the particular creativity that comes from never being quite at the top of the food chain until very recently and knowing it might not last. And then they walk through the galaxy in these small, soft-looking bodies, and they learn the trade languages, and they make small talk at food promenades, and they file the correct transit documentation, and they apologize for noise that isn't theirs. and they contain it. Until sometimes, after 43 minutes of a trade coordinator from the Fenley's corridor, trying to make them feel small in a transit terminal in the middle of the outer rim, they stop containing it. Not with rage, that's the thing. It wasn't rage. It was something much quieter and much more frightening than rage. It was just the truth. This is what I am. This is where I'm from. I have been patient because I chose to be patient. I can stop choosing that. And the thing that collapsed wasn't her. Epilogue, what I remember most. She was gone before the end of my rotation. Her departure gate called and she picked up her bag and walked through Terminal 7 the same way she'd sat through it, head up, eyes moving, steady, unhurried. A few people watched her go, not everyone. Most of the crowd had moved on, were busy with their own connections and their own exhaustion and their own endless transit terminal concerns. But a few watched. She didn't look back. I don't know her name. The transit file Thress pulled was flagged confidential. Surveyor certification records often are, so I only know what I've already told you. Earth, planetary assessment, pre-contact certification, 11 hostile environment clearances. I know what she ordered at the water dispensary because I filled it. Plain water. No flavor additives, no electrolyte supplements, no nothing. I know what her bag looked like. I know how she sat. I know what her face was doing for 43 minutes while a being twice her size tried to make her afraid, and I know what it looked like when she decided that was finished. I think about it when I do my rounds now. When I sweep past the seating pods in the eastern section, under the big structural columns at E14 and E15, in Terminal 7 of Velorath 9 Transit Hub. I think every species in this terminal is from somewhere. Every one of them carries their somewhere with them, invisibly, in the way they stand and the way they respond, and the things that do or don't reach them. We move through each other's space all day, every day, with no idea of the context we're embedded in. No idea of what the person sitting quietly in the corner is actually made of. The galaxy is big, bigger than any one of us has the ability to fully understand. But some parts of it are more serious than others. And sometimes, not often, but sometimes, you get to see the difference.